Well, welcome back or welcome to Gc3. We exist as a church to embrace people, develop followers, and deploy disciples. If you have any questions about how we can embrace, develop, or deploy you, seek me out, seek out one of our Eddie volunteers with the tags. We would love to talk with you about the next steps in your discipleship. This week, going through the Quest 52 book, we came to the second part of the question, was Jesus political? You know what? I'm going to stop there for a second. Pause. There's a couple things that I was going to talk to you guys about before I started into this, so I'll start over in a second. If you have noticed, maybe you have, maybe you haven't, our new website through Subsplash is now live. So if you go to gracehappens.net, we actually bought new domains, so it'll take you to gc3frederick.com. So I like that better, and it actually has our name in it. And so if you do that, it'll take you there anyway, or you can just go to gc3frederick.com. You can see the new website, how it is built, and the work that has gone into it, mostly by me, but also with the people who, run Subsplash. And so you can look at that. And hopefully the next couple of weeks, we will have the Gc3 app. If you have an Android device, you can, look down at everybody else with your superiority. Kidding. But you can actually get the Gc3 app right now, but we won't really start using it until everybody can have it. So that's okay. But if you search Gc3 Frederick on the Android, the Google Play Store, you can find the Gc3 app there. You can see what it's like. But we won't fully launch that for another couple of weeks while they work things out with Apple. So that's exciting stuff, right? Yeah. Everybody's like, sure. I think it's exciting. The nice thing about the new website is it's a lot more user-friendly. You can find things on there a lot better. It has a much updated look than what we were able to do through WordPress and everything like that. It actually uses a different system, so it's a lot easier. And the app is going to be really helpful to have daily and weekly communications with all of you so that you can know what's going on a little bit better. We send out emails, we do those things, and sometimes they're easy to ignore. With the app, you'll have the push notifications that we send out so that you can have kind of more real-time knowledge of what is happening. So be watching for that. In the next couple weeks, we'll do some things to make sure that launches well and so that everybody knows how to use it once we get to that point. Also wanted to talk about Christmas Eve. That is coming up. I think we should be having a flyer for that if you wanted to start handing those out in the next sometime soon. Cool. All right. So be watching for those too. We will get those out to you. Don't forget to stick around today for the big Thanksgiving meal together with your church family. Want to make sure that we have some good time of fellowship there. Now, talking about was Jesus political? Last week we looked at the triumphal entry, how it was actually a big political statement for Jesus. He rode in on a donkey, which was essentially saying both that he was a king and that he was coming in peace. This week we are looking at another major move that he made in clearing out the temple. I always, we probably have heard of this event. There was a meme going around on the internet for a while that I always thought was pretty funny. It said, in remembering what would Jesus do and thinking about what Jesus would do in every situation, remember that, flipping over tables and chasing people around with a whip is still a possibility, right? I always rather enjoyed that. But this passage is really interesting to me for a couple of reasons. Number one, I have never preached on this passage. Now, for somebody who's been doing this for 12 years, there's a lot of places that I probably haven't preached, but I think this might be one of the only places in talking about the life of Jesus that I have never preached on. And that's interesting to me. I think it kind of gets lost in the whole Holy Week, the Passion Week idea, that he, right after he came in, that next day, Monday, he went and cleared out the temple. And I think that's significant. But I've never preached on this. The other interesting thing about this is that this passage happens to be the passage that I have most recently seen mocked by one of my atheist friends. It's a really difficult thing sometimes to have treated someone with love and respect for over 20 years and then have them come along and post a link to this passage and talk about how he and his friends were coming together and mocking it. Now, granted, without any understanding or knowledge of the cultural or historical context of this passage, it is odd. I will give you that. But it still hurt. And then made me really angry. Now, luckily, I didn't do anything with that anger. I didn't jump on and, tear him apart on his post. I didn't, call him and say, we can't be friends anymore. But I was really mad. And in that, I felt like I had failed because I got angry. And we're going to talk about that here in a minute. Because this passage to me, one of the biggest things that I get out of this passage is sometimes it's okay to be angry. But in your anger, do not sin. And I'm actually kind of thankful that this all happened because I can come and teach on this passage from a place of knowing that there are people out there who look at this as a way to mock God because it's such a seemingly strange event. It's hard to understand, and so it's necessary to look at it closely so that we can understand it well. So that if the opportunity arises for any of us to talk about it with other people, we can do so well. So that's mostly what I'm going to do today. We're going to look at the story together. We're going to go through, kind of tell it to you in my own words, and then we're going to come back and talk about how we can apply this. And maybe how we can talk about it. So here's the story. Jesus had just come into Jerusalem the day before. We call that Palm Sunday, the triumphal entry. Jesus comes in and he is celebrated, right? We know from last week that the people didn't really understand what he was going to do, but still they understood that he came in on a donkey, was calling himself king, and they celebrated him. The people had heard that he was the Messiah, that he was the promised one. They didn't understand what he was promised for exactly, didn't understand what he was going to do, but still he was celebrated. Palm Sunday was a big day for Jesus and his disciples. Now, because of it being a big deal, many people think that Jesus missed the evening meal because it was just so much going on that day. And generally, of that, people of that time and place would eat 2 meals a day. We talk about 3 square meals. That wasn't a thing then. They ate 2 meals a day. They would eat, a couple of hours after work had started, and then they would eat when work was done, right? So they would eat at 10 a.m. and 6 p.m. generally. So it may have been that Jesus didn't get to eat on Sunday night, and so in the morning, as they were walking back into town after staying the night somewhere outside of town, it could have been that Jesus was extra hungry. Now, I'm not really sure, honestly, that Jesus being extra hungry is the real reason for the next thing that happened. You see, as they were going into town, Jesus, it does say was hungry. It does mention that. He was hungry, and he saw a fig tree. And he went up to the fig tree looking for figs. But it even says there that it was not the season for figs. So he didn't find any figs, right? Now, Mark Moore in the book, explains it a little bit further. He was, so hungry probably that he was looking for unripe figs, which would have tasted bad, but it would have been some calories to fill him up, right? But he didn't find any figs. And so he curses the fig tree for not having any figs in the non-fig season. Now, if we were to think that Jesus did this just because he was ticked off that there were no figs, or because he was hungry and, I get being hangry, I do that. Not as bad as Jamie, but I do that. Gasp. Anyway, you think she's you haven't seen her hungry. I shouldn't do that. Sorry. But anyway, if he was just ticked off, if he was just hangry and he cursed the tree because of that, that does not seem like the character of Jesus to me. So there must have been another reason, right? And I think there was. I think that Jesus did this not because he was angry at the tree. It would be really silly to be angry at a tree. But not because he was angry, not because he was hungry, but because he saw an opportunity to teach his disciples something. And he took it. When you're walking along with your kids, when Jamie goes on hikes with the kids a lot, when we're walking, when we're talking, when we're driving, if you see opportunities to teach your kids something, you take them, right? I remember one time my dad and I were fishing, and he's like, it was not a good day of fishing. Nothing, I was little too, so, the fact that nothing was biting was just, why are we here? And he started teaching me about the ducks out there, and I was like, that's nice. He got so mad. He's like, listen, we may not be catching anything, but you can at least learn something here. And but we do that. We want to find the opportunities to teach our kids things as we go through life, because those are some of the most important lessons that I got as a kid. Is anybody with me on that? Some of the best lessons that I learned were when Dad and I were, road tripping, or when we were fishing, or when we were walking together. Life lessons can be learned. And so I think Jesus saw the opportunity to teach his disciples something. And so he cursed this fig tree. But we're going to come back to that. Just like Mark does. We're going to come back to that. Actually, Mark does this a lot in his Gospels. Enough in his Gospel that it's actually got a name called the Markan Sandwich. Kind of silly, right? Like the Markan Sandwich. He does this enough times in his Gospel where he starts telling a story, and then he moves from that story to a different story, and then brings it back together with the second part of the first story, right? So in this case, it is the Markan Sandwich. The fig tree is the bread, the bottom and top bun, right? And then the clearing out of the temple is the meat, or vegetables if you're into that kind of thing. I love vegetables. I'm just kidding. But anyway, so the temple is the meat. And so we're going to go to the temple. We'll come back to the fig tree. So Jesus goes from the fig tree into the temple, and when he gets there, he sees something that just enrages him. It is a mess. There are thousands of people there traveling from all over to do the Passover in Jerusalem. And they will, of course, if they're traveling there for the Passover, need a sacrificial lamb, right? But the sacrificial lamb has to be without blemish. And if it's going to be without blemish, it's going to have to be inspected by the priests. But if the priests are not exactly moral people, then these lambs might just not pass inspection, right? And if they didn't pass inspection, what are these poor people going to do who are so far from home? Well, don't worry. The priests have perfect lambs for sale right there. And well, of course, since they're perfect, of course they're going to cost more. Oh, you can't afford to buy this lamb. Well, don't worry, we'll help you out by purchasing your imperfect lamb for half of what it's worth, and then maybe that will get you to where you need to be to buy this perfect lamb. And then, of course, they pack that lamb that they just bought off for a little while and then sell it to the next person who brings a lamb, an imperfect lamb. Oh, and I'm sorry, we don't actually take that kind of coin either. So you're going to have to go trade that money with the money changers for a fee. I had not really realized how bad this was until I read the quest book for the week. Like, good grief, they were awful. Like, that is so messed up, preying on these people. And of course, Jesus was not okay with this either. The temple was supposed to be the house of God. So he is filled with righteous indignation, but like actually righteous indignation. I feel like some of us get this righteous indignation, but it's not so righteous. And he flips over the tables of the people he hears doing this, and he chases these con men out of there. And then he says this to them: Is it not written, my house shall be called a house of prayer for all nations, but you have made it a den of robbers. And as you can imagine, the chief priests were not exactly excited about this. But they also couldn't do anything because the Pharisees were also not okay with them doing what they were doing. So this was this political move that Jesus did that actually played his two enemies off of each other a little bit. So then at the end of the day, he left the city and walked by the fig tree once again, which had withered away to its roots. And then it says this. Let's just read this. This is Mark 11:21 through, following. Where does it end? 25, I think. And Peter remembered and said to him, Rabbi, look, the fig tree that you cursed is withered. Jesus answered him, have faith in God. Truly I say to you, whoever says to this mountain, be taken up and thrown into the sea, and does not doubt in his heart, but believes that what he says will come to pass, it will be done for him. Therefore, I tell you, whatever you ask in prayer, believe that you have received it, and it will be yours. And whenever you stand praying, forgive, if you have anything against anyone, so that your Father also who is in heaven may forgive you your trespasses. Now, like I said, I think Jesus saw an opportunity to teach his apostles something, and he took it. Yes, it says he was hungry. And I would agree that that is probably why he went looking for unripe figs. But I don't think disappointment or anger was what caused him to curse the tree. He saw the opportunity to teach, and he took it. He used the fig tree as an object lesson that we are, and especially the apostles, have power in their prayer. That if we have faith in God, we can move mountains. Now, of course, he will only do that if it is his will and fits his purposes. We can't make God move mountains, which is, I think, what some people take this to say. Like some people would say that if you believe and receive it hard enough, that you can make God give it to you. And that is not what this means. That would be like, oh, you didn't get it, then you must not have believed hard enough. That's not how this works. That's not how any of this works. As we all know, I really do believe that God answers our every prayer. But a lot of the time the answer is no or not yet. Amen? I believe that God answers every prayer. Sometimes we just don't pray the right things. And so the answer is no. So what can we learn from this? What can we take away from this entire account of Jesus' life? There's a few things. We can take away that we really do have power in prayer, that we really do have the power of God behind us, pushing us, making the way for us, before and behind. But I think what I take from this more than anything else personally, we can see that Jesus made political moves. We can learn that we have power in prayer. We know that that James tells us, the prayers of the righteous work or availeth much, if you're into that kind of wording. But what I think I always need to be reminded of in this is that Jesus was angry. And no, actually, more than that, he was filled with zeal. He was fired up. He was, so zeal from a dictionary definition is great energy or enthusiasm in pursuit of a cause or an objective. This wasn't just Jesus acting out because he was mad. And in fact, it was likely not a knee-jerk reaction. He had seen the temple the day before. He had seen what was going on and then came back to do something about it. Here's my point, though. And I guess this sermon maybe applies more to the guys in here than the ladies, but I think we can all learn something from this here. As a man, and I know this can be true for women too, but as a man, I had to grow up and figure out that if I act on some of my feelings, people can get hurt or things can get broken. There are consequences to acting on some of my feelings. I learned, for instance, at a young age that if you are angry and feel like you have to hit something, now listen once again, I know a lot of people won't even get that feeling, like they don't understand that. It's a conversation that Jamie and I have had, that she has never had the feeling of the need to act physically upon anger, right? I have had that feeling a lot. When you feel that way, though, you can't hit walls because they are breakable, is one of the lessons I learned when I was a kid. That first time you pop a wall and then a hole the size of your fist just goes through it. Oh, well, I don't think I'll do that again. So I found, it's kind of ridiculous, but I had a lot of rage as a teenager. So I found this place that was like not an archway, but a doorway. Right? And it was reinforced and the studs were very, very close. So that was my punch-in place. Because I could hurt my hand and not hurt the wall. And that's what I needed, right? So dumb. But anyway, that's what it was. And so I learned that I couldn't punch walls because they were breakable. But then I had to also learn that when you let your anger out in different ways, it can hurt things in different ways too. It can hurt relationships. It can hurt feelings. And yes, feelings that are hurt are real and they matter. And see, then, you punch the punching place and you hurt your hand, and what happens then? People mock you for being dumb and losing your cool and showing emotion. Now, when I was really young, every emotion I had came out as crying. So I was mocked as a crybaby. When I got older, every emotion turned into anger because, well, it was better than crying. When we show emotions as an adult, we upset other people and it gets to be not worth it. So as men, we are essentially taught through culture and through experiences that we are not supposed to have any emotional response to anything. Through life and experience, we learn that once we show emotion, we have lost the battle. And I have never been good at not showing my emotions. So I go through life with regret after regret. Now, what this passage shows me, and I would bet that there are others here in this room this morning that need to hear this too, is that Jesus showed emotion. Jesus wept over Jerusalem. Jesus acted on his great emotions in the temple and did what was needed. He did what he needed to do to right the wrongs and injustices that were taking place in his Father's house. What this passage helps me to see is that some things are definitely worth being angry about. Like taking things that are holy and making a mockery of them. Jesus showed emotion. Jesus was filled with zeal. Jesus was angry and sad. Jesus wept openly. Jesus got frustrated with his friends. Get behind me, Satan. Jesus was protective over children. Jesus was tender with women who were hurting. Jesus portrayed what some people who don't understand much might call toxic masculinity. Men of Gc3, I want to tell you this morning, it is okay to be men. I give you permission. Women, it is okay to feel the emotions that you so often keep pent up, and yes, I know. It's okay to express them. In fact, please do, because it's so much less confusing for us. I'm fine. No, you're not. I don't know why you're not. I'm so scared. Emotions are okay, feelings are okay, but let's read Ephesians 4:26 through 29. Be angry and do not sin. Oof. Do not let the sun go down on your anger. Oof. And give no opportunity to the devil. Let the thief no longer steal, but rather let him labor doing honest work with his own hands so that he may have something to share with anyone in need. Let no corrupting talk come out of your mouths, but only such as is good for building up, as fits the occasion, that it may give grace to those who hear. Emotions are okay. Feelings are okay, but in your anger, do not sin. Getting angry is not a failure. Hurting people in any way, physically, emotionally, psychologically, hurting people is a failure. Sadness is not a failure, but allowing it to consume you is. Frustration is not a sin. Insulting a brother or sister in Christ is. Are you with me this morning? Jesus shows us that we can feel, that becoming emotional is not a failure. Jesus shows us that even that sometimes right action needs to be taken, even when it might seem extreme. Jesus shows us that some things are worth getting angry over. And to me, that is such a relief. Is anyone with me this morning? It's such a relief. You know, I started talking this morning about how this passage had been brought to me recently because of a friend of mine mocking it. And I got so angry and hurt when I saw that, and I felt in that moment like a failure because I got angry. What good is my anger going to ever do in helping him come to know Christ? And you know, I'm not sure that he ever will. If I had to guess, I would say he probably will not. And that does make me horribly sad. And, I could have gone on, I could have argued with him, I could have called him down for doing this. He was mocking what is holy. I probably would have been justified in doing that, but what would have come out of that is more hurt on both sides and nothing positive. So you see, here's the thing. Jesus acted upon the zeal that he felt for his Father's house. But he also had thought it through. It was not reactionary, I don't think. He knew in that moment that it would also be effective. He knew that it would make a positive difference if he did this thing, that it would do good. It is righteous to act in situations and do the right thing. But we as humans do not have the benefit of omniscience that Jesus did. And so we have to be discerning in every situation. Was it wrong for me to be angry? No. I don't believe it was. Would it have been wrong of me to push him away because of it? Yes. To engage in an argument that would do nothing to bring him closer to God but would probably push him away? Yeah, that would have been wrong. That would have been sin. Sometimes we have to take a step back and make sure that in our anger we do not sin. How can we be hope to the hopeless if we push them away in anger when they act out in their hopelessness? I'm going to say that again. How can we be hope to the hopeless if we push them away in anger when they act out in their hopelessness? We have said it a bunch of times here, hurting people hurt people. A lot of times when people get angry at us because of our faith or other reasons, it's really just because they feel so completely helpless and they cannot stand that not everybody does feel that way. It hurts more to see somebody who has hope when you're hopeless, when you feel hopeless. So what falls on us is to make sure that we do not push people away in anger that are really just acting out in their hopelessness. Be discerning. Look at the situation, take a breath. Be angry, but in your anger do not sin. Be compassionate. Know that a lot of the time, the reason that people are angry with you is because they just don't feel like they have any hope. So your call this church, let me try that again. Your call this week, church, to be discerning in every situation. And as always, go and bring hope to those around you. Let's pray. Father God, we are thankful for your word. We are thankful for the comfort that it gives us, for the wisdom that comes from hearing your word, from learning and listening. Help us to apply these things. Let us know of the times that we should be angry, but help us to not sin in our anger. Help us to know the times that we should act for your good. Help us to be discerning and help us to be hope to the hopeless in Frederick. We pray this in Jesus' name. Amen.